let's talk about abortion. I know it's a bit of an awkward subject for a lot of people, and honestly it's quite difficult for a lot of people to talk about purely because of the rhetoric that's been going on about it for the past few years. But obviously, as a result of the recent Roe v. Wade potential overturning that's been leaked from the Supreme Court, it's restarted a conversation that I think a lot of people have been ignoring for a very long time. And that conversation is, why exactly are people having abortions? Because we can all cast our minds back to the rhetoric that was used in the 90s by administrations like the Clintons, talking about how it's only supposed to be safe, legal and rare, which at the time was the standard. And honestly, as long as you're protecting people who would otherwise be in a situation where they might die during pregnancy, that's a standard that I could stand by potentially. But the recent conversation has made a lot of people realise that that is not the standard that is being held anymore, and we are far, far beyond that standard. Before I go any further, I did want to shill out for an article that's in the document, John, if you want to just right at the top there, if you want to bring it up, which is just talk about Carl's most recent video, which you should check out, called What Zoomers Have to Do to Save Themselves, and this is a follow-up to his recent What Have Millennials Done to the Zoomers, right. And of course this is of course speaking to all of the Zoomers who weren't already aborted. So you're already a bit further ahead in life than some of you.
Dear God.
So check that video out if you want some good tactical ideas of what Zoomers need to do to become the based chads that you are destined to be. Don't let us down, guys, because honestly, you're the next generation. You're our only hope in being able to stem the tide of leftist degeneracy.
And someone had so much fun making that thumbnail, it would be a shame not to click on it, wouldn't it?
It really would. Michael works very hard on these, so please do him a favour. And anyway, let's carry on with it. So the first thing I want to point out is that the Democratic establishment has not reacted well to this. We've all seen the video of Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas herself, being mad as hell, and Lori Lightfoot and others are now coming out with things like this. To my friends in the LGBTQ plus community, she's missed out a few letters, but I'll forgive her. The Supreme Court is coming for us next. This moment has to be a call to arms. And then her response, we will not surrender our rights without a fight to victory. Now, if you ask me, this sounds somewhat insurrection-y, but I'll forgive her for it. But yeah, they are... The Democrats are actually thinking that now that we're potentially repealing Roe v. Wade because of the Supreme Court, we'll be coming for gay rights next and gay marriage and all that sort of stuff, which is honestly not on my agenda, not something that I'm particularly interested in.
I mean, I don't really see the connection between abortion and gay rights, personally.
Neither do I.
That seems a little shoehorned, a bit of a reach, if you ask me.
The Democrats leftists in general, seem to be able to make some pretty astonishing reaches with what they talk about. But if she's talking about potentially the right for perverted teachers to talk to 5-year-olds about sex and other such topics, then perhaps I would understand where she's coming from, because I don't want my kids learning about that stuff without my knowledge, without my permission, and to make sure that what they're learning about is age appropriate. But the Democrats don't seem to appreciate that. But on the subject of people waking up, there have been some clips going around recently where people who otherwise would be classified pretty much on the left, who are pretty establishment figures like Bill Maher and Joe Rogan, this conversation has kind of opened their eyes to a few things regarding this. And I thought we'd look at two of these clips just so that we can see the sorts of conversations that people are starting to wake up to.
All right, so people hate talking about abortion, so let's do it. I don't want to do it, but it's the big issue, and we got to do it, and this is what happened. And, you know, it's interesting because until this memo was leaked and we found out that now, unless something very unforeseen happens, the Supreme Court is going to undo Roe versus Wade after 49 years, we haven't really been focusing on it, or maybe I'm projecting. I guess I haven't been enough, because I learned things this week, because this put it on the front page, that are pretty basic things that I did not know about abortion. Like in Europe, the modern countries of Europe, way more restrictive than we are, or what they're even proposing. If you are pro-choice, you would like it a lot less in Germany and Italy and France and Spain and Switzerland. Did you know that? I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
That's right, okay. I learned most people who are pro-life are women. Did not know that.
Very interesting, isn't it?
Well, this is what happens when you get all of your information, when you trust the mainstream media, the New York Times, the BBC, MSNBC, CNN. You trust them to decide accurately, in your interest, what sort of information you're allowed to see. And you end up not knowing the basic facts about the issues which you've been worked up to be super emotional about.
Yes, I would say that this has been something that has been obscured by the mainstream for a long time because, to use your kind of language, I would say that the idea of elective abortions is one of the pillars of the current ideological cathedral, which is infesting the mainstream establishment. That being that it's kind of a change of, it's kind of a non sequitur from the argument that people were having when all this came up about the first time, which is it's turned into a woman's right to choose, whereas the original argument was, is this murder? Is this killing an innocent human being, whether or not you want to classify it as just a clump of cells or not? And Joe Rogan actually has considered this argument now, because Joe Rogan, I'm aware, has been very pro-choice for a very long time. But it seems that even he has started to question the narrative that has been fed to him for a long time.
It's just, I just don't like, I don't like people telling other people what they can and can't do, but it gets weird when the baby gets like 6 months old. It gets weird when they're really, really pregnant, because in some states, for the longest, I don't know what the rules are now, but I know that some states had late-term abortions, and sometimes you need one for medical reasons, right? Like the woman could die if she gives birth. Like it's a decision that people have to make.
Well, if you look back, what was your favorite part of being a fetus?
Well, what was your favorite part of being 3? Should I be able to shoot you at 3 because I don't want to take care of you anymore? It's one of those things. It's like I am 100% for a woman's right to choose. But as a human being, just a person observing things, there's a big difference between a little clump of cells and a fetus with an eyeball and a beating heart. And for anybody to pretend there's not, you're not doing any
But
argument.
where do you draw the line?
Right, where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the question. And it's what I call a human issue. It's a very complicated issue. It's so fraught with emotion, and it's so political.
Some good points brought
Why
up
is
there.
it so fraught with emotion and so political, though? I wonder who has a role in making it such a polarized issue.
I wonder, but I do think you're speaking to something there, which is that there is something innate in us that recognises that this is not a good thing to be doing. Why is it that we don't see videos of abortions being performed, for instance? Why would the mainstream fight tooth and nail to prevent these sorts of things coming out to the public? Because if we saw them, we would suddenly understand the true severity of what's going on.
And this is the Peter Hitchens point on this issue, which is that the left does not prevent you from seeing these because they are too squeamish to show blood and guts on TV. They don't show you what an abortion looks like because it would make you much less pro-abortion than they want you to be.
It really would. Also, I've got to commend Joe for completely expertly evading that attempted gotcha. Oh, what's your favourite part of being a fetus? Yeah, well, can you remember what it was like being 2? Can I just shoot you because you won't remember?
But that's also an excellent mini case study of why people watch Joe Rogan, listen to him, and not mainstream media, because whatever you say, he is being genuine in that interview. It's like,
yes, he is.
He's not pretending to have all the answers or to try and get you worked up. He's just saying, look, I'm pro-choice, but I think about this and I think this is a problem. What do you think?
If anything, he actually embodies the ideal of what the left says that they wish they could be, that of starting a conversation, having a conversation. Well, Joe's having the conversation and they still try and cancel it.
Of course.
Which is
because he's having the conversation in the wrong way with the wrong conclusions. That's why.
Yes, that is absolutely it. But moving on, Lauren Southern posted something that I found interesting, which was in response to Destiny, who posted a pretty terrible meme, to be honest, of the EU being like, oh, we'll solve climate crisis, and then America go, oh, we'll ban abortion, which was a complete straw man of it. And not that Destiny is above straw manning his political opponents. So Lauren Southern just responded with this handy-dandy graph, which shows the comparison between American state laws when it comes to abortion terms when compared to European terms, European standards when it comes to when you can have an abortion and what term you can do. As you can see there, so yellow is the legal limit, makes it between 11 to 20 weeks. The vast majority of Europe is there, whereas the vast majority of the US, it has the legal limit between 21 to 30 weeks. Now, at 30 weeks, you can see there it says, in brackets, survival outside of womb is possible at 24 weeks. So you are legitimately killing something because they always go on about, oh, it's a parasite, and if it can't survive outside of the womb, then it doesn't.
But
then
the sort
why
of
shouldn't the
people
woman...
who describe a baby in the womb as a parasite without making a joke are just the
Vile.
worst. Yeah.
Vile people. And also there's something to point out, which is that this is only stats for on-demand abortions, which is elective, which means that the mother isn't at risk, there's no health problems, you just don't want the child. So this is what America allows for people just because they feel like it. And you can see Texas is the only state which goes between 1 to 10 weeks, which points out you can get the heartbeat detected at 6 weeks. And also that shockingly there are 6 states in the US which allow abortion between the legal limit of 31 to 40 weeks. And of course, remember 40 weeks, about 9 months, which is when most people would be born. So at that point, you are murdering something, as far as I'm concerned. I don't understand how an abortionist could live with themselves, knowing that they've done anything like that. So this is just what the question is. Is it that you are allowing a woman to choose, or is it that you are murdering something? And I think for the vast majority of those states, they are allowing you to murder something just because you don't feel like taking on responsibility, which to me is completely vile. Oh, not 6, actually 7, because I didn't realise Alaska also allowed them up to 40 weeks, which is disgusting.
The common argument that you hear against having lower limits on when you can abort is people saying, but if you only have a 10-week or a 20-week limit, then those nasty right-wingers and conservatives are going to create loads of obfuscatory barriers that you have to go over, like you have to see this doctor X number of times and have this psychiatric evaluation and so on and so forth, and they will use that because they're anti-abortion to push you over the limit so that you can't have an abortion. So that's the argument that they'll usually give. But even in that case, I mean, an abortion at 40 weeks, what the hell are you on?
I know. I think
crazy.
That's just trying to obfuscate the discussion that we're having now, which is this necessary?
I mean,
is this the practice of a civilized society?
Well, I'm struggling to put myself in the mindset of a woman who has an abortion between 35 and 40 weeks. Right,
when
because
you can feel it kicking.
That's a long period of time where you are carrying this baby, where you're essentially looking after it physically, and
I think it's abhorrent, personally. And also, just another point that I want to bring in here is I thought Americans wanted more European-style healthcare. Well, this is what you get with it, guys. So, you get what you ask for. And let's go through some of the important stats that I've got here. This is just stuff that's been shared about on Twitter, which I thought was interesting. So this was just a graph of reasons that a table of reasons why people get abortions. Note that only like vanishingly small percentages are due to actual issues that could be had, like a woman's life being endangered, or the one that they always like to bring up, what about incest? Well, how often is that happening? Really, not very often. Whereas the real reason that most people is giving is no reason at all. 92% say they give no reason elective, and there are some debunkers in this thread that I just want to address for anybody who's going to say that, Harry, you're just taking this out of context. This is just some random thing that people have shared on Twitter. So they actually put in the source for where they got this information from, and then somebody put, I do appreciate the reply, however, I looked at the sources and the data doesn't match the original information that you posted. So click on that image on the left for me there, please, John. And let's see here. So what is the most common reason giving? Having a baby would dramatically change my life.
Is that 74%? Wait, are those cases?
I think these are cases per as compared to the total. So 74 cases. So if this is to be taken as representative, the vast majority are just going, well, I don't want them because it would have changed my life. I don't think
that's the point.
I don't think that's a good enough reason to kill something.
But just below that, in 73, is can't afford a baby now.
Okay. I don't think that's a good enough reason. Once again, if you've got a 3-year-old and you can't afford the 3-year-old anymore, you don't just get to shoot it in the face. You kind of got to adapt. Unmarried, still not a reason. But then if we go down right to the bottom of this table, you can see here, was a victim of rape, 1.
1 out of 1,160.
Became pregnant as a result of incest, less than half. Less than half of a person. Which means that is statistically irrelevant, I would assume. So I assume that just means none. So that's just completely ridiculous. This whole argument of like, well, if you actually look at the figures, I think the vast majority of these do not represent a situation in which I say you are justified in killing something. Not sure about a relationship. Great, that doesn't mean you get to kill someone. And so this is not the dunk that you thought it was, whoever shared this. And let's move on to more figures that are given here by a woman. Oh, this is another one, yeah. So table 2, they also put not emotionally or mentally prepared. Who is? Who is emotionally or mentally prepared to have a child until you have it in your arms? This is something that I've heard from many people who have children. They're not sure, they don't understand how they're going to be able to cope with it until they have that child in their arms at the table when they've just given birth and they realize, I would do anything to protect this. That's the beauty of childbirth and having children, is that it gives you a greater purpose outside of just being worried about yourself. But let's carry on. So I've got some more statistics. This woman, Megan Basham, put single women who earn $47,000 plus a year abort 32% of their babies, whereas single women making $11,000 a year or less abort about 8.6% of their babies. So the vast majority of the people doing this sort of thing, is it really because you're just in a situation where you can't deal with a baby, where the emotional, you'd be too financially, the struggle financially would be just too much for you? Or
Well,
is
it's
it?
arguably a bigger change for the single women earning more, because having the baby, it means that they are less likely to be able to successfully continue to prosecute that career.
That's true.
Whereas if they're making less, then first of all there is a welfare state of some description. There are ways to, like, it's less of a financial hit to devote yourself to looking after that baby full time or part time. So there is that to.
But the clear thing that's pointed out, because there's another graph that she put on here as well. If you go to the next tab for me, John, thank you. Yeah, so there's the graph that she got it from. So this is just not about poor women trying to mitigate bad circumstances, or about women in general trying to mitigate bad circumstances. The vast majority of this seems to me, judging by the figures that I've seen, to be more about women wanting to escape the consequences of their actions.
I think that's...
Some of them, at least. Perhaps that's a bit harsh, but the vast majority seems to be, perhaps I just didn't want to wear didn't want him to wear a condom. Perhaps I got drunk and went on a night out and this just sort of happened. But I don't think that that's justifiable, personally. I never used to be so hard line against all of this sort of stuff, but when you start to look into it, and like you said, when you start to see what happens and who's doing this, and to the sort of age that these babies are when it happens, it really does start to change your perspective a little bit.
I suppose so.
On this whole thing. And then there was another figure that was different from the one that was given previously, but Carl sent this one through to me, which was just talking about how roughly 80% of late-term abortions are elective, and they just go through some of the facts and figures and how they get to the conclusions. Like I say, it is different to the other figure that was given, but it is still, for me, shockingly high that people are just choosing to do this without any outside reason. And then if we carry on...
Now, there is a little bit of good news there, though, which is if you actually look at the case count here, we have 157 people out of 12,336 having an abortion over the 21-week limit. So the leftists are at least right on the one point they make, which is that late-term abortions are thankfully rare compared to the overall total.
But
still,
true,
the overall
thankfully.
number is quite high.
It is still shocking to me that it's even legal in some states to go to as sort of far into the terms as they do. But there was also this other article talking about what percentage of abortions are medically necessary. And I just want to preface this by saying that this is this will be referring to countries like the US and European countries where the medical infrastructure is in such a state where you can pretty much guarantee that people are going to be safe. In certain medical, in certain situations, for instance, if there will be an issue with the pregnancy where there will be options to go against instead of just aborting it. But this probably won't apply to, like, if you're in Africa or places that don't, or South America where they don't have quite as good medical infrastructure. So they just go on here. Abortions performed to preserve the life or the health of the mother are so rare that they do not register statistically, according to Alan Guttmacher of Planned Parenthood, who did more to promote and spread abortion on demand throughout the world than any other individual. In 1967,
What a legacy to have.
I know, right? He commented, "Today it is possible for almost any patient to be brought through pregnancy alive unless she suffers from a fatal disease such as cancer or leukemia, and if so, abortion would be unlikely to prolong, much less save the life." And that's in 1967.
Gosh.
Imagine how far we've come medically
Yeah.
from then as well. Naturally, the percentage of abortions allegedly performed to save the life or health of the mother will vary somewhat based on the country, but we can see from the testimony of doctors and researchers that these cases are exceedingly rare. Even abortionists testify that if there is a medical emergency, the course of action is to deliver the baby prematurely, because to go through the stages required for a surgical abortion would cause more, if not less, cause more, not less danger to the mother. As far back as 1981, the former Surgeon General of the US, a Dr. C. Everett Koop, said the fact of the matter is that abortion as a necessity to save the life of the mother is so rare as to be non-existent.
Yeah, so I just want to say here, there's a maxim in law, which is that extreme cases make bad laws. And often what happens in justice is that there will be an extreme case, which, because it is so outlandish, gets a lot of eyes on it. And then because it is so high in the public consciousness, new laws are made based on that case to ensure that that case can't happen again, almost. So it's like a satisficing approach to law. But there's a similar thing happening here, you could argue, where so one side of the debate is saying, well, we need to have abortion because otherwise it will kill mothers, pregnant women. And the fact is that actually that's a very rare and extreme case. And then the other side of it is, well, we need to have very strict limits on abortion because there are loads and loads of late-term abortions. And while there are a lot, it is actually still a small proportion, very small proportion.
It is still a very small
proportion. So if we are
proportion.
really trying to, I think, address this issue for the benefit of both sides, we need to perhaps lower the temperature when it comes to discussing these two extremes, which is what gets people outraged, and look at the majority of the thousands who are not in either extreme.
That is true, but I do still think at its heart this is a moral question of the right to terminate a life before it even really gets a chance to be started. Because I think the whole question of when does a life begin is very difficult to answer, and because of that, I think personally, from my view, it's best to just start where it's most logical, as soon as it's conceived. Personally, for me, that's kind of where I've come to with this. Personally,
I must say I have a lot of sympathy for that view. I don't have any strong opinions on abortion personally. However, if we are to somehow progress in this debate rather than just going to war over it, I think it's important to remember that the extremes of the distribution aren't going to lead us to any kind of good solution or dialogue.
Yes, that is true. But I'll just carry on with this because we've only got a little bit left. So they also address the mental health argument, the idea that, if I have this child, it will so drastically affect my mental health that I won't be able to live with myself anymore. So they just say there is substantial evidence from several sources, including the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry and BMC Medicine, that abortions do not solve mental issues and usually aggravate them, even when compared with the issues that sometimes develop in miscarriage cases and others. The research presented concluded that long-term mental health problems in the wake of induced abortions increase and the probability of depression, anxiety, guilt, etc. goes up by 81% compared to mothers who carried their baby until birth. That's probably due to a number of factors, but I can't imagine that one of them isn't that, oh God, did I make the right decision?
Sure. But it's also worth pointing out that postnatal depression is a real thing.
This is true.
I don't think you can I think it's a terrible idea to try and solve postnatal depression by abortion. That's a dreadful idea. But I think this whole issue of postnatal depression underlines the fact that it's important to actually be within a stable social unit, ideally a family with a partner, a male partner or a long-term partner who can actually deal with you when you can't deal with the baby and things like this, or even your own parents or own extended family.
Well, that would be part of the greater solution that we're all trying to come
which
towards.
Underlines the point that this is a social problem as well as an abortion problem.
Yes, that is true. But I thought I'd also just end this with the fact that Peter Hitchens helpfully put up something that his late brother Christopher Hitchens said in an interview about abortion with Crisis magazine in January 1988. And I think that this is just an interesting thing to end on here, his opinion on this, which is, look, once you allow that the occupant of the womb is even potentially alive, it cuts athwart any glib invocation of the woman's right to choose. I'm sorry I don't have Christopher Hitchens' voice for all of you listening, so you'll just have to settle with me. If the unborn is a candidate member of the next generation, it means that it is society's responsibility. I used to argue that if this is denied, you might as well permit abortion in the third trimester. And how shocked I imagine he would be if he was still alive today to learn what's going on. I wasn't as surprised as perhaps I ought to have been when some feminists, only some and partly to annoy, said yes to that. They at least were prepared to accept their own logic and say that the unborn is nobody's business but theirs. That is a very reactionary and selfish position, and it stems from this original evasion about the fetus being merely an appendage.
Yeah.
Which is a very good point on it, and I can only imagine what he would say nowadays, given that those feminists, which he assumed were just saying it to annoy him, actually got their way in some states in America.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do just want to underline that I may have upset some people in the comments by playing devil's advocate.
No, I think it's good to play devil's advocate.
But I think it is important when you're talking about a polarizing issue like abortion to try and at least represent the other side somewhat.
No, thank you for doing so. But from my perspective, don't let the media gaslight you into the reasons that they would like to push of why it is that women are getting abortions, because as far as I'm concerned, the statistics just do not show that that is true.
Mm-hmm.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the Epoch series, this one between Bo and Thomas on the history of Formula One. And if you want to follow Thomas, you can follow him on Getter at Thomas W. Dowling on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.